History, everyone. I am going to do a brief video, but the last video, my previous video, is about the 1832 Creek census and the surrounding documents. Now, while I have done some further research into that, as far as like, you know, the numbers of slaves versus the number of freedmen versus the number of, you know, actual Indians and things like that, and like, you know, as far as like within the chiefly or principal chief families, as they're called for some reason, that alone is a question I need to have an answer for. So why they're, I think it's like, are they members of the House of Kings? And for some reason, the white man referred to them as principal chiefs, even though there's only one principal chief of the whole nation. Then as well as now, as I understand it. But each town had its own Miko or town king or chief. You know, anyways, you look at those families and you look at the number of like Indians versus the number of slaves, and you compare that to like, you know, I want to do comparison to that with like the rest of the nation at that time. So I do want, there's a lot of research I still want to do when it comes to, and I need to do, and I'm committed to doing on the 1832 census, also known as the Parson Abbott Roll, for those who might be watching for the first time. So it's been a struggle to kind of get that going and finding the time to really get that going. But I was thinking about previous videos I've done. I was going down my list of old videos, and I was thinking, like, I've got my documents better organized, but contextually, like, what were these documents for? Like, I knew that 1832 was before the 1836, 1837 removal. I didn't realize that it was like kind of like the foundation leading up to the removal itself, like in a more official capacity. I didn't really think about that at the time. And so I'm thinking, like, yeah, and also, I mean, you have these other bands, like these eastern bands of Creeks, that their whole citizenship is predicated on that Parson Abbott Roll, whereas Muskogee Nation of Oklahoma, that's not necessarily the case, because not everyone who is in Muskogee Nation of Oklahoma, like, you know, was on that roll, because you have people who in 1828 that already moved with the McIntosh Party, and then you have people that's it's actually really, really hard in a lot of ways to trace back to ancestors on the Parson Abbott Roll without having better documentation. That is not easy to come across, even going on the National Archives. Okay, I'm looking up specific ancestors, and I'm having a difficult time pinpointing them in the National Archives. People that should be and probably are on the Parson Abbott Roll, and I just can't verify that it's my guy. I can't in some cases. And if I had better documents between like the Little Creek payrolls, you know, going back to the 1832 documents, I'd be able to better verify ancestors. And it's those in-between documents that, you know, need to be better researched and made available. Now, as far as the census records go, I want to talk briefly about that. So the census records, contextually, what I think needs to be done, because 1832 documents are incredibly important. I realize for a number of reasons, especially with the whole Freedmen, you know, question going, you know, and all the like the moral issue of that whole issue, as it currently affects Muskogee Nation of Oklahoma, and affecting the history and the narrative put out by the Muskogee Creek Indian Freedmen Band on their website. That particular set of documents is actually really relevant on either whatever side of the aisle you're on. It's very, very relevant set of documents. It needs to be better explained and better researched and interpreted. And that's partly why I'm doing all that, is to get the information out, so it can, and interpreting it based upon the knowledge of history that I have, and maybe others can provide more. But as far as the other census records, like, why was the 1882 census of Creek Nation done? I mean, it wasn't like, okay, every 10 years we're doing census. Like, you had like 1882, then you had 1890, then you had 1895 and 1896, and you had the authenticated rolls and the blah, 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 blah rolls. you had all these different roles that it didn't happen necessarily every 10 years like the national, like the United States, like federal census is, and even at the time was. Okay, this is the Indian population, specifically Cree Nation, but I'm sure the other tribes at that time probably also had similar roles taken for similar reasons. But what was the reason why that some of these roles existed? It's like my proof of heirship as to the Loyal Creek claim document that my mom has. It does not exist simply to trace my lineage back. And it does not trace back to refugees in the Trail of Tears, per se. It has to do with refugees and soldiers, people making claims from the Civil War, promises from the federal government that weren't being kept for, like 100 years almost. So what is the reason for each set of documents? And that is really, in many ways, as important as how you use those documents to trace your family history back. Because why? Why did it happen? What is the history surrounding that? And so that's kind of the question I have for all of those roles. Some of them, it's kind of like, okay, it might seem obvious. Others, maybe not so much. But that's the question that comes to mind when I think of 1832. And, why did that census get taken? Also, unfortunately, unlike in later half of the 19th century censuses, you didn't have the name of every single member of the household. You had a number of males and females. You had the head of household. You had a number of slaves, not distinguishing between, the gender. And it's unfortunate how limited the census was at that time. But that's also how certain federal censuses also were at that time. So, it's like the further back you go when looking at genealogy and census records, the more the more difficult it is to find information from them because they have less information in them. And that's just the truth of the matter. So anyways, those are kind of some of my thoughts regarding that. Some of the questions, the single question as to why does this document exist? And I would like all of you doing the research to also ask the same question. And when we ask that question, and then we also ask, well, why aren't there more, family members listed? And how do you trace back to these people? Theoretically, everyone in Muskogee Nation of Oklahoma should have ancestors on that Parson Abbott roll. The problem is actually tracing back with documentation could be the hard part. I can only trace back to, in some cases, probably the probable ancestors that I can more or less almost verify. It's because the proof of heirship document, which itself has some flaws in it, which I might have mentioned before. But that's the thing. So I want to find more documents and better copies. There's people out there that have actual white background, black text images of what looks like the 1904 Loyal Creek payroll. What I have is the microfilm copies, black background, white text. Unfortunately, that doesn't give me the most clearest image, and they're not digitized. So I don't really have as clear of information as I would like from that. It's very unfortunate, but it's true. So that's something that I'm going to work on. I need to, and I'll get back to you guys on that as I find out more, as I clarify these things. So I'm sorry I haven't been on lately. Like I said, it's been really busy. It's hard to find time. And, there's projects I've been kind of working on, I'd like to show you guys, but I just haven't had time to really set that up. And so, and it's been hot here where I live. It's been too hot. And the house is too crowded. The apartment's too crowded. So, but anyways, hope you're all doing well. And I will do some follow-ups hopefully very soon. So until then, Mado.